is a little bit of TLC. So in this video we're going to be doing a start to finish restoration of the skis from the bottom slippery side to the top coating of paint, all the way to repairing the bindings. So whether you're here to learn how to do it, or whether you're here to relax, I hope you enjoy. There are timestamps in the description to guide you along in whichever procedure you would need to do to your skis. I've been doing this to a few skis in the past and over time, and so I like to think that I kind of know what I'm doing by now. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. So the first step is to completely strip the skis of their bindings and to prepare and clean the skis for the next steps. Depending on what skis or bindings you have, it's going to be a little bit different to remove them, but typically you're going to have about 8 bolts or screws to remove a binding. And of course, before doing any work, do anything, especially when you're going to be painting or repairing, you want to clean everything you're going to be working on of all the surface contamination. That'll make for a much smoother product as well as an easier workflow. And so, after you're done cleaning, you might have to do some optional preparation steps. I, for instance, had to, for the base, remove all the tiny bristle-like hairs that were poking out around the edges of severe deformities and cuts on the base of the skis. This was very simply done with an X-Acto knife, and as long as you have some patience and are willing to give some time, you can very delicately remove any blemishes with an X-Acto knife. Next, we are going to focus on the base of the skis and repairing the P-Tex plastic surface. If your skis are still pretty smooth and still quite new, then you won't have to do this and you can skip to painting the ski to look however you wish. But in my case, I have a very rough and coarse base of 12 or so years of skiing and hitting rocks and trees and rails and boxes. And so I am going to be doing a complete finish of the base, which the first step is going to involve filling all the holes and cuts in the bottom of the base of the ski. This is done by melting and using P-Tex sticks. These are really cheap from your ski shop. It was like $1 for a stick, and it only required half of one to fix 2. And so basically, you're going to take the P-Tex stick and wave it over the flame until it just catches fire. And from that point it'll heat up and start dripping one after another. And hold this as close to the bottom as you can to reduce the carbon buildup. If the flame is very big, you want to keep it very small by holding it close basically, so that the P-Tex can soak right into the grooves and cuts and holes. In my case, I probably covered about 60% of the base. And you really can't go wrong here. The more you cover, the more work you're going to have to do later to smooth out and remove. But then you'll have a smoother, finer, finished product. Unfortunately, I had to use black P-Tex sticks because they didn't have orange, but I mean, this is really just to go fast and work well, not to look fantastic, especially not the bottom. Now that these skis are all prepared and protected, we can begin the painting process in 4 increments. Just going to be a base coat so that they would blend in completely with the snow, but I opted to do a dirty and rugged snowflake black look. Whenever painting, you typically want to use a minimum of 3 coats or layers of paint. This ensures that it grips on and stays there, and also prevents any drips. So as you can see, for my first coat, I'm just misting these keys as to create a sort of starter layer for the other layers of paint to latch onto. Read the spray paint that you're using and wait the appropriate amount of time to do the next layer. In my case, it's 5 minutes. I'm also painting my bindings in the same way. I probably could have gotten more creative, but I'm supposed to go skiing in 2 days, and I just kind of wanted them to work. So make sure to cover all the surfaces equally and let the paint dry before applying a second coat. I kind of went crazy on my first coat and added the black and everything, and it started to drip, but in this case I really didn't mind because I wanted a very rugged and kind of dark look. Did the same thing with the skis, applied a second layer of paint a little bit thicker. You're basically wanting to thicken up the paint each layer until the final one, or you really want to put it down heavy. Just watch out, because when I did my final coat of paint, it really did drip a lot, especially on my bindings. I'm still a little kid deep down inside, and so I love fireplaces and I love spray painting things, whether it's my dad's car or a bunch of skis. Whenever painting, patience and time is a very valuable quality to have. The more time and the more patience you put into it, the better it is going to turn out. Where I was painting, it was actually minus 15 that day. And so the cans started to freeze and the streams of paint were coming out really weird. I'm just gonna say that as my excuse for adding way too much paint. And because it was so cold, I had to spray paint in my garage and then run them inside so that they'd dry in the warmth. And then run them back into the garage, paint another layer, and do it all over again 3 times. But painting is very simple if you've never done it before. Just stay about 12 inches away from what you're painting and go very delicately. In most cases, like P-Tex, more is better. But when spray painting, really less is better. If you have to do 10 very, very light coats, that's going to look so much nicer and work so much better than one very thick coat. So we painted the top. I forgot to record the varnish, but it's basically just painting it on with the paintbrush and letting it sit. Use the instructions. And so we're moving on to removing and scraping the P-Tex. You can start initially by just scratching off the hard-to-reach places. But scraping off P-Tex is very, very easy. You can just use a piece of flat and equal metal. In my case, I used a razor for an X-Acto knife and just run it along the surface entirely by pointing the sharp end away and just pulling it in whichever direction. That'll take off layer by layer very slowly and create a very smooth base. You basically want to keep rubbing and scraping until you're left with a wax is all scraped off, you're going to want to do a final sanding of the base before we do any waxing. And sanding, you're going to want to use somewhere between 300 to 1000 grit, which is the coarseness of the sandpaper. That's going to flatten out these skis even better and remove any extra pieces of P-Tex. And also in my case, because they're so old, the bottom of my skis are very rough and very slow. So by sanding with a very high grit, that should flatten it out and create a very or much more smooth surface. You don't want it to be perfectly smooth anyway, because wax will adhere better and soak up into all those pores when we're waxing. Waxing is also very, very easy. You're just going to want to take your piece of wax and use a regular iron. You don't need anything fancy. We're basically just melting the wax without steaming it. Put it to the lowest setting if you have to, and melt the wax onto your skis, covering the skis completely, starting from the edges and moving your way to the center. It's always better, once again, to use too much, because we're going to be scraping this off as well. You just want to drip, 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 drip all over the skis. You don't want to leave the iron onto a spot too long, because you could actually melt the P-Tex, and once you melt the P-Tex, it is gone. You're throwing those skis in the garbage. But if your settings are on very low, like I had mine, the risk is very, very minimal. You basically just want to run over the wax until it becomes clear and melts. Here I just got some really artsy-fartsy shots where I'm melting the wax off the board and onto all the crevices. I really enjoyed working on my skis. It was a very relaxing and almost meditative act, and it's always relaxing to do this kind of thing. Next, you're going to want to scrape off the wax, just like we scraped off the P-Tex. Long, smooth strokes, ripping off and sliding off as much wax as you can. Fortunately, working on the wax is much simpler than working on the P-Tex, and it smooths right off. You want to be very delicate and make sure your blade is very flat, so that you're creating a perfectly uniform bottom. Finally, if you have one, you can use a nylon brush, but everyone also says you can just use a regular kitchen brush that you would use to wash your pots and pans, and this is just a final smoothing process. You want to work from the tip to the tail and brush along to smooth out the wax and remove any that was left over. You basically want to get the wax all the way down to the bottom, just so it's filling the holes. You don't really want the wax on the surface. After waxing the bottom of the skis, I was really surprised by how smooth it actually was. I spent way too much time on this project, so I'm glad it turned out well. I actually skied with them just yesterday, and it's a night and day difference. I was flying down the hill. It was almost dangerous doing what I was doing. But the skis are done. They're completely restored and completely protected for years to come. Now I just have to make sure I wax a couple times a season, and they should last me forever if I wanted to. I hope you enjoyed the video, whether you were actually trying to repair your skis or whether you were trying to relax. I kind of just felt like during this Christmas break, working on a little bit of a project and just fixing up my skis, I had a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next